I know what you're thinking. He's from back east. He's going to tell us all about how things work, and he's going to lecture us. Well, I'm a little different. There's a reason why I'm a successful journalist, and that is most journalists who work in New York or Washington believe you all live in flyover country, and that's frankly as much attention or concern that they pay to you. I believe you live in fly-in territory. My job is to go and find out what's happening in the states. You're the laboratories of democracy, and a lot of the innovative reforms that have been used in other states started in Missouri or were early pioneers. And I believe common sense and common wisdom reside in places like Missouri. And ever since I worked with Rush Limbaugh, I've had a lot of respect for the common sense and the common wisdom of the people of Missouri. As opposed to that, we have Washington, D.C. Now, it's easy to poke fun at Washington, D.C., and I'm about to do a little bit of that, but it's even worse than you think. I was standing at the Amtrak station in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago, and this story is only slightly embellished. I admit it's slightly embellished, but it's basically true. I'm standing there, and ahead of me in the self-service ticket line, where you have the machines where you put in your credit card, was a freshman member of Congress, actually it's from a neighboring state to Missouri, who I'd met on the campaign trail. And we'd introduced each other again on the line, and he went first to buy his ticket, and then he started banging the machine and becoming very agitated. And he turned back to me and said, "I can't believe what I just did." And I said, "What?" He says, "I'm only new here. I'm a freshman. I didn't know the rules. I can't believe it." He said, "What happened?" He says, "Do you think the speaker will forgive me?" And I said, "What?" And he says, "You have no idea how much trouble I'm in." And I said, "What?" He says, "I don't know how it happened, but just now I accidentally spent my own money." By the way, there's some truth to that. In order to meet some of the ethics requirements that Congress now has, to fully meet them, every congressman has to have 3 credit cards and 3 cell phones. Credit card and cell phone for campaign use, credit card and cell phone for congressional use, credit card and cell phone for personal use. This fellow was taking a trip that his campaign was supposed to pay for, and sure enough, he accidentally paid for it himself. Anyway, I patted him on the back, and I consoled him, and I said, "Don't worry, I know you're new here, but in a few days, you're going to get over this really fast." And sure enough, we ended up with the stimulus bill. It's a shame that Congress doesn't have what California has, which is a 2/3 requirement to pass a bill of that size and monstrosity. California actually has a 2/3 requirement to pass a budget, which is why the state Senate and the state assembly in California, which is my home state where I was a staffer in the state legislature for a while, is in lockdown. They have literally imprisoned the state legislature. Now, I know this appeals to you in some respects, but they have literally imprisoned the state legislature in chambers. And the president pro tem of the Senate in California, a man who holds the equivalent job that Peter had in Missouri, President pro tem Darrell Steinberg, a Democrat, lectured the members last night, "I will not allow anyone to go home, to resume their life, to have any kind of resumption of normal business until you vote yes on this budget deal," which is a $14 billion tax increase in California, which is already one of the most heavily taxed states in the country. No wonder they call California the Arizona Employment Development Corporation, the Nevada Development Corporation. It's very sad what's happening there. It's also sad what's happening in Washington with the stimulus bill. First, the good news. Barack Obama won the election fair and square. He won the election because the previous administration had discredited itself. The Republican Congress had often discredited itself, and he promised change and he promised hope. And 53% of the people decided he represented that and they would take a chance on it. I disagree with those Republicans who say that Barack Obama doesn't have a right to simply say, "We won and this is the way we're going to do things." That's what our democracy is all about. If you win elections, you inherit the responsibility and the right to implement your program. And early on, I think Barack Obama had some excellent moves. He completely abandoned his approach on taxes. He basically said the Bush tax cuts would stay in place in 2009 and 2010. He had previously talked about raising them, including capital gains taxes, which is the equivalent of cutting your nose off to spite your face. Because he recognized, as every school of economics recognizes, the one thing you do not do in a recession. The one thing you do not do in a recession is raise taxes. And he properly understood that. He also appointed some very responsible and moderate members of his cabinet, those that didn't end up having tax problems or other problems or ethical problems. And I think he had a good start up until about January 20th. He was one of the best presidents in waiting we had. Then I think there was not a fatal mistake, not even a mortal mistake, but a serious mistake. And that is, he did not fully understand that he had been elected president. Now, we do have co-equal branches of government, but a president, especially in the time of crisis, is expected to be lead dog. And I think he forgot that. He had sat down and had all of his meetings with Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, and Harry Reid, the Senate Majority Leader, and he apparently had decided, I'm gonna have to work with these people. They're the ones who know Washington, they're the ones who can know what can get through Congress. I'll give them the first crack at the stimulus bill. Big mistake. You could walk through Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid's deepest thoughts on writing a responsible piece of legislation like the stimulus bill and not get your ankles wet. They have 12 years of pent-up demand. 16 years of pent-up demand where the Democrats have not held both the White House and Congress, and they had all of these special interest groups. Both parties have special interest groups, but the Democratic special interest groups haven't been fed fully for 16 years. And they have all of this pent-up demand for new spending programs, which is why Rahm Emanuel gave the game away in November after he became Barack Obama's chief of staff when he said, we should not let this crisis go to waste. This is an opportunity for fundamental change. And sure enough, the stimulus bill is fundamental change in terms of how much money it's going to take out of your purse or your pocketbook. Now, how big is it? Well, we're always told these numbers that don't mean anything to us. $787 billion, with interest costs $1.1 trillion. You know, one of the things we're going to experience in the next couple of years is what our grandfathers and grandmothers experienced in the 1930s. They lived through an era in which all of the numbers started blurring and people got confused. They called it the Illions phenomenon. We were making the transition from millions to billions in the public policy debate. And everyone got confused because they couldn't figure out the difference between a million and a billion. Well, you're going to be confused too, and so will I, because to comprehend the distinction as we drift from billions to trillions is going to be even harder. So I'm going to break down the stimulus bill for you. The amount of money involved is staggering. There are 90 million people who pay income taxes in this country. Now, I know a lot more pay payroll taxes but don't reach the threshold for paying income taxes. But payroll taxes are in theory supposed to be dedicated to Social Security, even though we spend all that money as soon as we take it in. So the burden of the rest of the government is supposed to be paid by the 90 million income tax filers, basically the people in this room. So there are 90 million income tax filers. $787 billion means the average taxpayer is going to pay over $8,700 for that bill. Each and every one of you, $8,700. If you add $8,700 to the average tax bill, that will get people's attention. And that's on top of everything else we're going to be spending this year. With the stimulus bill, we're going to have the $700 billion financial bailout. We started that under the Bush administration. We're going to finish that under the Obama administration. And we had the bailout for the auto companies, but that wasn't enough. Now they're coming back for the second bailout, which will be succeeded by the third bailout and the fourth bailout. And then there'll be other deficit spending. This year's deficit is already $1.7 trillion. Notice we've already made the transition from billion to trillion. That's almost $20,000 per taxpayer. $20,000, the deficit spending this year alone. And that's not even contemplating what surprises we might have. So we're talking big money.